My 3 friends tried to substance a girl, so I let the whole town know. To put it simply, I was a little poop as a kid. I used to steal from stores and from my family, swear and throw things at random people walking down the street, smoked from the age of 12 and didn't give a poop about anyone but my friends. They were my real family, or so I thought, and the group of all 5 of us would cause trouble every single day. My parents, though in my later years have told me they should have been more effective in their discipline, really weren't to blame. I was just a mixed up kid. I used to think that doing all this stuff made me cool. I can't really describe how superior I felt when I made grown adults afraid of me, but it made me feel powerful, and power was something I craved when I was younger. I could go on and on about my sins, but the fact is that I was just fucked in the head. So long story short, when I was 16, my parents finally had enough, and despite all my tantrums and screaming and even some physical violence against my dad, they decided to put me in a school for troubled youth. I call it a school, but what it really was a military institution that taught discipline in the most brutally effective ways while throwing in some literacy and numeracy classes along the way. Without going into too much detail, I'll say that this school changed me. While I was aggressive, violent, cocky and near homicidal when I was first dumped on their doorstep, the men who ran this camp broke me down. I was there for just over a year. No phone calls, no visits home, no access to the outside world. For 1 whole year, these real-life hard-ass men taught me just how much of a poop stain I really was. By the end of my second summer, I was a changed kid. I had fought and screamed and gotten my ass kicked more times than I can count, but eventually I was beaten down. These men taught me that real men simply don't act the way I did, and that the type of path I was headed down would lead me either to jail or death. They were brutally honest about it, especially this one counselor Jay. By the end of my stay I considered Jay a second father. Though I hated him at first for making me feel inferior, he really did me a favor teaching me how toxic my behavior was, and to this day I still think of him as something of a hero. He was the main person who deemed me ready to return home. When I returned home I had changed from an abusive little prick to a somewhat civilized young man, ready to take on my last year of high school. I was nervous to go back, since I had adapted to the disciplinary school lifestyle, but I was also excited. I missed my friends and hoped they would just accept me back despite the fact that I hadn't spoken to any of them in over a year. To my relief, I was accepted back with open arms. One of my closest friends had moved states since I'd been away, but the other 3 were ecstatic to see me. Over the next few weeks I settled down. I didn't spend a lot of time with them outside of school. My parents were kind of testing how much I'd matured since returning, and were setting boundaries on when I could go out, how long I could stay out and where I could go, etc. I was determined to prove to them I wasn't the same F-up that had ruined their lives all those years, so I followed their rules and only really talked to my friends during school. All of this is relevant because of what happened next. I had joined the school football team all 3 friends were a part of, and one evening after practice, all my teammates were in the gym, sweaty and dirty but pleased with ourselves. I was laughing and chatting with my 3 best friends so much I didn't really notice that we were the last left in the gym. But that's when the conversation started turning bad. One of my friends, I'll call him F1 for simplicity, started telling me about a college party they were all planning on going to, and how they'd been crashing college parties for a few months now, since it was easy access to girls and booze. I was hesitant about it because I didn't think my mom and dad would agree to let me go, but then F1 started talking about this girl he was planning on inviting. A girl who went to the same school as us but not one I thought F1 had any real relationship with. I knew her, but I didn't know her. He started to tell both my other friends, and me, that he'd been trying to get her into bed for a while and she kept making excuses, so he planned on taking her to the party and finally smashing. When I asked him, in a joking way, what makes you so sure she won't reject you again? He looked me dead in the eye and said as casually as you please, the most chilling sentence I have ever heard in my entire life. I'm just gonna slip something in her drink. It'll loosen her up, no problem. At first I just kind of awkwardly laughed, thinking it was some fucked up joke, but they weren't laughing with me. When I asked him if he was serious, he told me he was sick of her bullshit games and knew she was just stringing him along, and that the pills would just make things easier. I could not believe my fucking ears. I excused myself from the conversation pretty quickly and practically bolted home, most likely driving through several stop signs, but I really don't remember. I spent the whole night convincing myself my friends were just messing around. A few more days pass and the conversation in the locker room is all but forgotten, though they hadn't shut up about the party, and kept insisting that I just sneak out and join them. I got called a wimp repeatedly for telling them I wasn't going because of my parents, but again, I just brushed it off. Then the poop finally hit the fan. During yet another after-school training session we all end up being the last in the locker room again, and F1 does something I never would have expected in 1,000 fucking years. All 3 of them have been talking about the party this whole time, then F1 starts rummaging through his gym bag. He tells us all to look at this and tosses F2 a small bag of little pink pills. Immediately, I feel the blood drain from my face, and like a bomb's going off in my head, a voice in my mind is screaming, holy poop, this is really happening, this is serious, holy poop. It's really hard to describe what I was feeling when F1 started going into detail about how he planned on inviting the girl to the party, slipping something into her drink and making use of one of the frat boys' bedrooms for a few hours. I was sick. Like literally could have hurled everything from my stomach all over the floor as I listened to all 3 of them talk about how awesome the party was going to be after just describing how they were planning to rope a girl. I couldn't take it, and again I ran off. I actually did end up puking later that night, going over and over in my head what I had just witnessed. I almost couldn't believe it. These 3 boys had been my friends for 15 years. I thought of them as my own family, thought I knew them better than anyone, but 1 year away and this happens? I'll tell you that I actually broke down crying that night. I'm not ashamed to admit it. What I am ashamed of is how long I took to actually get a grip and handle it. I knew I should have told someone, but in some fucked up way, my loyalties were still screwed. I know now what I should have done, but I was 17, and these were my best friends. I didn't want them to get into trouble, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't let this poop go down, so instead of reporting all I'd heard to an adult like a normal effing person, I decided I'd sort it out all on my own. I went to F1 and told him not to do what he had planned. I told him it was stupid and dangerous and would ruin both his life and the life of the girl he was planning on drugging. He didn't even blink. He got right in my face and told me that the school I got sent to had turned me into a pussy. He said that he hated how much I'd changed and had been trying to change me back with F2 and F3. He even told me how they'd been talking about me behind my back and how they'd planned to give me a turn on the girl once F1 was done with her, just to show me what I was missing out on. Then he said something I'll never forget. He told me, word for word, I'm doing that little beach a favor. She's a fucking virgin. And after this party, your mom won't be the only one finally getting some. I punched him. We fought, and we both got sent home on suspension for fighting. I could not believe it. I was seething. My best friend had said that to me. My best friend had told me he was going to rope an innocent girl at a party, and I was a pussy for not wanting to join in? I was disgusted. It sickened me to my core, and I was done with him. My parents were disappointed I had gotten suspended so shortly after coming home, but I just sat quietly while my mom cried and my dad screamed at me. I know now that I should have told him, but after what F1 said to me, I had this insane notion in my head that I was going to get him back all on my own. After a weekend of being grounded, I went back to school, and the first thing I did was seek out F1. He was about as bashed up as I was, but he was sporting a nice black eye from where I'd hit him in the face. F2 and F3 were standing with him, and they all glared at me as I approached them. Then I did something that made me feel sick. I apologized to him. I told him I was sorry I hit him, and that he was right, I had changed, and I hated what that school had done to me, and I wanted to go back to being the old me again. Surprisingly, they all bought it. F1 and I even hugged it out, and I put the cherry on top when I told them I'd be coming to the party. Now, for my dumbass teenage plan.